She knocked at the wrong castle door, and the scarred duke claimed her as his destiny. The rain fell not as a baptism but as a punishment, each icy drop a lash against Alara's threadbare cloak. The wind, a ravenous beast, tore at the fabric, seeking the last vestiges of warmth from her bones. She had been walking for 2 days, seeking a scullery position at the estate of Baron Croft, a place spoken of in hushed, respectful tones in her village. But the storm had swallowed the path, turning the forest into a labyrinth of grasping branches and treacherous mud. Now, looming before her through the gray sheet of rain, was a fortress. Not the modest manor she sought, but a grim colossus of stone and shadow, a place that seemed to command the very storm that battered it. Blackwood Keep. Desperation, cold and sharp, was a more potent master than fear. Her knuckles, numb and blue, rapped against the impossibly large oak door. Inside, Alastair, the 9th Duke of Blackwood, stared into the hearth, though the flames offered him no comfort. The firelight danced across the jagged scar that cleaved his face from temple to jaw, a permanent reminder of a battle he had survived but never truly left. He was a prisoner in his own home, besieged not by armies, but by the relentless matchmaking of his aunt, the Duchess Eleanor. For months, she had paraded a line of simpering, eligible ladies before him, each more vapid than the last. The final candidate, a Lady Annabel, was due this very week. His aunt's latest letter had hinted at a new strategy, a woman who would arrive under a clever guise, a test of his character to see if he could recognize true nobility beneath a humble facade. A cruel, cynical game. Then came the pounding at the door, faint but desperate, when his steward opened it to reveal a half-drowned slip of a girl in peasant's clothes, her face pale with exhaustion but her eyes holding a defiant spark. A cold, bitter amusement coiled in Alastair's gut. So this is she, the final pawn in his aunt's game. She had arrived. She knocked at the wrong castle door, and the scarred duke claimed her as his destiny. He would play this game, but by his own rules. He would see how long this noble soul could endure true hardship before her pretense shattered. "You seek shelter?" Alastair's voice was a gravelly echo in the cavernous hall. Alara flinched, her gaze drawn to the shadowed figure by the fire. She could see little but his immense frame and the glint of the flames on something stark and pale on his face. "Yes, your grace. Just until the storm passes. I have lost my way." A slow, chilling smile touched Alastair's lips, a gesture that did not reach his cold eyes. "Shelter is not given freely here. It is earned." He watched her, expecting a flicker of indignation, a crack in the carefully constructed mask of the commoner. He saw only weary acceptance. It was a better performance than he had anticipated. "The West Wing Library has not been touched in a decade. It is a tomb of dust and neglect. You will make it clean. Then you may have a bowl of soup and a place by the kitchen fire." For the next 3 days Alara worked. The library was, as he'd said, a mausoleum of forgotten knowledge. Thick shrouds of dust lay over everything, and the air was heavy with the scent of decay. Alastair watched her from the shadows of the gallery above. He watched her haul buckets of water, her slender arms trembling with the effort. He watched her gently wipe the grime from leather-bound spines, her touch reverent. She did not complain. She did not sigh with theatrical woe. She worked with a quiet, methodical grace that unsettled him. She was supposed to be acting a part, but her hands, already chapped and calloused, told a story of genuine hardship that contradicted his theory. His steward, a man who had served the family for 40 years, approached him one evening. "A message from Duchess Eleanor, your grace. The roads are impassable. Lady Annabel's arrival will be delayed a fortnight." Alastair's eyes narrowed. So the real candidate was delayed. This girl, then, was not Lady Annabel in disguise. Was she some other plant? A different test? The Duchess was nothing if not cunning. His certainty wavered, but his suspicion held firm. This girl was a piece on a board, he was sure of it. He would not be made a fool. Yet, as he watched Alara coax a weak, sputtering fire to life in the library's long-dormant hearth, A strange, unfamiliar warmth touched a corner of his frozen heart. She had not just cleaned the room. She had brought it back to life. The firelight softened the stern faces of his ancestors in their portraits, and for the first time in years, the room felt less like a tomb and more like a sanctuary. One evening, a week into her strange servitude, the storm returned with a vengeance. Thunder cracked the sky, a sound like the splintering of the very heavens. Alistair was in his study, a glass of brandy in his hand, when a particularly violent clap echoed the cannon fire of his past. The glass slipped from his grasp, shattering on the flagstones. He did not notice. He was back on the battlefield, the air thick with smoke and screams, the ground slick with blood. His breath came in ragged gasps, his hands clenched into fists. The door creaked open. It was Alara, holding a tray with a steaming cup. She took in the scene, the shattered glass, the Duke's rigid posture, the stark terror in his eyes. She had seen that look before, in the eyes of old soldiers in her village who woke screaming from nightmares. Without a word, she set the tray down, knelt, and began carefully picking up the shards of glass. She did not speak of the mess or his state. "The sky wages its own wars sometimes, Your Grace," she said softly, her voice a balm on his raw nerves. When the glass was cleared, she pushed the cup of chamomile tea toward him. "My grandmother always said it soothes a troubled spirit." He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Not as a pawn, not as a test, but as a woman offering simple, unadorned kindness. There was no pity in her gaze, only a profound and gentle understanding that cut through his defenses more effectively than any sword. He took the cup, his fingers brushing against hers. Her skin was cool, his was feverish. The contact was brief, but it grounded him, pulling him from the bloody mud of his memory and back into the quiet of his study. He drank the tea. It tasted of herbs and an impossible peace. From that night, the nature of his tests began to change. They became less about hardship and more about proximity. He requested she read to him in the now gleaming library, claiming the light hurt his eyes. He listened not to the words of dusty philosophy but to the gentle cadence of her voice, a melody that soothed the discord in his soul. He asked for her help in the ruined gardens, a place he had not set foot in since his mother's death. These were once her pride. He found himself telling her, gesturing to a tangle of weeds that had choked the life from a rosebush. She said a garden is a promise, that something beautiful can grow from dirt and diligence. "It still can," Alara replied, kneeling and gently pulling a weed from the base of the bush. "It just needs a patient hand." He watched her hands, so capable and sure, as she worked the soil. He saw the calluses, the faint lines of dirt beneath her nails, and felt a sharp, unfamiliar pang of guilt. These were not the hands of a noblewoman playing a part. These were the hands of a woman who understood work, who understood growth. He was falling for her, for the quiet strength in her spine, the compassion in her eyes, the simple, devastating authenticity of her soul. And the lie he had constructed around her was becoming a cage of his own making. Every kind word from her was a turn of the key, locking him in tighter with his own deceit. One afternoon, as a pale sun finally broke through the clouds, he found her near the stables, watching a falconer work with a young kestrel. The bird was skittish, refusing to settle on the man's glove. Alistair came to stand beside her. "He is afraid. He was injured as a chick." "He is not afraid," Alara corrected gently. "He is remembering. Fear is a memory we allow to live in the present." Her words struck him with the force of a physical blow. That was the truth of his own existence. He was not a monster, but a man allowing a memory of pain to define his present. In that moment, the last of his suspicion dissolved, replaced by a terrifying, exhilarating certainty. He did not care who she was or what game she was supposedly playing. He loved her. That evening he sought her out. He found her in the kitchens, mending one of his shirts by the light of a single candle. The domesticity of the scene, the simple act of care, overwhelmed him. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. "Alara!" She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. He reached out, his hand tracing the line of her jaw. His thumb brushed over her soft lips. The deception was a poison in his throat. He had to tell her. He had to confess the ugly truth of his assumptions, his cruel game. "There is something you must know," he began, his voice thick with an emotion he could no longer name. But the words wouldn't come. How could he explain the cynical, broken man who had first greeted her? How could he bear to see the light in her eyes extinguish with the truth of his betrayal? Instead of confessing, he leaned in, his scarred cheek pressing against her soft one. He could feel her tremble. He surrendered to the overwhelming need that had consumed him for weeks. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a kiss of desperation, of yearning, of 1,000 unspoken apologies and a single profound truth. It was the kiss of a man drowning, and she was his only heir. For a breathtaking moment, she responded, her hands coming up to grip his arms. The world fell away, leaving only the two of them in the flickering candlelight, suspended in a moment of impossible connection built on a foundation of lies. The spell was broken by the sound of a carriage clattering into the courtyard. A footman burst into the kitchen, his face flushed. "Your Grace, carriage has arrived." "It is Lady Annabel." The name was a shard of ice in the warmth that had enveloped them. Alara pulled back, her eyes wide and confused. Alistair froze, the blood draining from his face. The moment he had dreaded, the one he had just tried and failed to prevent, was upon them. They stood in the great hall, a tableau of ruin. A young, sweet-faced woman in a traveling cloak stood looking bewildered. This was Lady Annabel. She smiled kindly at Alara. "Oh, hello! You must be the new maid from Oakhaven. Baron Croft wrote to my aunt. He mentioned he was expecting a girl named Alara. I am so glad you found shelter here during that dreadful storm." Every word was a nail in the coffin of their fragile connection. Oakhaven. Baron Croft. The truth, so simple and mundane, was more devastating than any complex intrigue. Alara's gaze snapped to Alistair. Her mind, quick and practical, assembled the pieces with horrifying clarity. His cold welcome, his cruel tests, the menial labor, his sudden, confusing tenderness. It all made a sickening kind of sense. "You thought," she whispered, her voice trembling not with fear, but with a dawning, shattering betrayal. "You thought I was someone else. One of them." A noblewoman in disguise, her voice gained a sharp, wounded edge. "You let me scrub your floors. You made me serve you. Was it a test, Your Grace? Or was it just a grand joke for the scarred, lonely Duke?" "Alara, listen to me," he pleaded, taking a step toward her. "It began that way, yes, but it changed. Everything changed." "Did it?" She shot back, her heart breaking with every word. She looked at her own hands, the hands he had claimed to admire, and saw them now as instruments of her own humiliation. "Or did the game just become more amusing when I didn't break?" She backed away from him, shaking her head. The kindness in her eyes had been replaced by a pain so profound it was like a physical wound. The trust, so painstakingly and beautifully grown, was utterly annihilated. "I am not a piece in your games," she said, her voice finally steady, imbued with a dignity that shamed him to his very soul. She turned, walked past the confused Lady Annabel, and did not look back. She walked out of the castle, into the clean, cold air of the evening, leaving Alistair standing alone in the sudden, crushing silence of the hall. The light was gone. Alara did not stop walking until she reached Baron Croft's estate. She was given the position she had sought, her work in the kitchens praised for its efficiency. She had a roof over her head, food in her belly, and the safety she had craved. But her heart was a hollow, aching void. The humiliation was a constant, bitter taste in her mouth. She had offered a man her compassion, her simple, honest self, and he had treated it as a performance, a lie to be exposed. She had been a fool. She resolved to harden her heart, to never again make the mistake of seeing past a man's scars to a soul that was not there. Meanwhile, Blackwood Keep became a tomb once more. Alistair sent Lady Annabel away with a sincere apology and a generous gift. He burned his aunt's furious letters without reading them. The silence in the castle was no longer peaceful. It was accusatory. Every clean surface in the library, every budding rose in the neglected garden, every flickering flame in the hearth screamed her absence. He saw his reflection in a polished suit of armor and was repulsed by the man staring back. The scar on his face was a mark of honor from battle, but he now felt he had an uglier, deeper scar on his soul, one carved by his own pride and cruelty. Alara's words echoed in his mind. Fear is a memory we allow to live in the present. He had allowed the memory of past betrayals to poison the one true, good thing that had ever entered his life. He had to earn his own redemption. A week later, Alistair rode out from Blackwood Keep, but not toward the Croft estate. He rode toward Oakhaven. He found the village just as she had described it, small, proud, and resilient. He saw her immediately. She was not scrubbing floors or serving lords. She was on a low scaffold, her sleeves rolled up, passing thatch to a man repairing a storm-damaged roof. She was surrounded by her people, a part of a community, her laughter ringing in the clear air. She was home. He dismounted, his fine clothes and ducal bearings starkly out of place. The villagers fell silent, watching him with suspicion. Alara froze, her face paling. Alistair walked toward her, stopping at the foot of the scaffold. He did not command her to come down. He waited, stripping himself of his rank, his power. He was just a man, a broken man. "I was wrong," he said, his voice carrying in the stillness. It was not a ducal proclamation, but a raw, human confession. "My pride, my bitterness, I used it as a shield, and I used it as a weapon against you. You who showed me nothing but kindness." He looked past her, to the assembled villagers. "I cannot undo the hurt I caused. I cannot unsay the things I thought. But I can try to be the man you thought I could be." He unrolled a parchment scroll he carried. It was not a love poem or a plea. It was a deed. "I have endowed the village of Oakhaven with the freehold of the sunken fields and the northern pastures," he announced. "The land is yours. It will provide for you, so that no storm or hard season can ever threaten your homes again." He then turned his gaze back to Alara, his eyes full of a pain and sincerity that mirrored her own. "This is not to buy your forgiveness," he said, his voice cracking. "I know that is not for sale. It is to prove that I have learned the lesson you taught me without even trying, that a man's worth is not in his title or his lands, but in what he does for others, in the promises he keeps. Please, allow me the chance to earn back your trust." Alara stared down at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was not the arrogant duke. This was the man from the study, terrified of the thunder. This was the man who had shared the story of his mother's garden. The grand gesture was not for her, but for her people. It was an act of profound, selfless repentance. She slowly descended the ladder, her feet finding solid ground. She walked toward him until they were inches apart. The entire village watched, holding its breath. "The first step to mending something broken," she said softly, her voice for his ears alone, "is admitting it is broken." She reached out and took his hand. It was the same hand she had tended in the woods, the same hand that had held her with such desperate longing. They returned to Blackwood Keep together. The journey was quiet, but it was a silence of healing, not of anger. When they arrived, the castle did not seem so grim. It was just a house, waiting for a home to be made inside it. Alara was not its servant, nor its prisoner. She was its future, his equal. Months later, they stood in the garden. It was a riot of color, the roses blooming in fragrant profusion, a testament to their patient hands. Alistair's scar was still there, a pale line against his tanned skin, but it no longer defined him. He smiled, a true, open smile that reached the depths of his blue eyes. He took her hand, their fingers lacing together in a comfortable, familiar way. Inside the castle, The fire in the great hall hearth burned bright and steady, a quiet triumph against the cold, a promise of the enduring warmth they had built, not on a foundation of lies, but on the hard-won, hallowed ground of forgiveness and love.